Something is shifting inside the walls of the Star, and if you are a Cowboys fan, you need to hear every single piece of this right now. A trade rumor involving a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback just landed like a bomb. A fan favorite tight end's roster spot is hanging by a thread. And a young safety just got a stamp of approval from his own head coach that changes everything. If you love this team the way we do, hit that subscribe button right now, because there is a lot more breaking news coming your way. Here's a question to chew on before we even get started. If you were sitting in Jerry Jones's chair right now, with all this roster drama swirling at once, which decision would keep you up at night the most? Let's get into everything happening with your Dallas Cowboys. Starting with the tight end room, because it just got shaken up hard. The Cowboys signed tight end Mitch Van Voren, a guy with one of the strangest journeys you will ever hear. He is a former college track star who set records in the 400-meter hurdles before switching back to football at a small school called Street Norbert. He has already bounced around Seattle, Cleveland, and New England, and now he is a Cowboy because the team is desperate for healthy bodies at tight end. In the corresponding move, Dallas waived defensive lineman Kelvin Gilliam, an undrafted rookie who just could not stay healthy enough to make a real push for a roster spot. Next, cornerback. ESPN's Todd Archer put out his projected depth chart, and it had Darren Bland, Kobe Durant, and Shavon Revel Jr. as the top three, with a spot after them still up for grabs, and Devin Moore behind that. But here is the twist. Archer believes the fourth cornerback spot might not even be on the roster right now, meaning the Cowboys could still go out and add a veteran free agent or work out a small trade before the season starts. And speaking of cornerback trades, brace yourself, because this next one is the real headline. NFL insider Jordan Schultz reported that Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback Joey Porter Jr. is a name that multiple teams around the league have been watching as a possible trade candidate. Porter is in the final year of his rookie deal. The cornerback market is exploding with money right now, and teams are wondering if Pittsburgh would actually consider moving a Pro Bowl caliber player. But hold on, because Steelers insider Markquese quickly pushed back, saying Pittsburgh has not received a single call about trading Porter and has zero interest unless somebody comes with a wild offer, like 2 first-round picks. Now to the tight end everybody has been talking about, Michael Trigg. He missed last week's game with a toe injury, and that has put his roster future in real doubt. There are 3 paths here. The Cowboys could just keep him on the roster as is. They could cut him and hope he clears waivers onto the practice squad. Or they could place him on injured reserve and stash him there, which is allowed twice per team during roster cuts, and does not require any public explanation. Then there is safety Markquese Bell, and this one just got a lot clearer. He did not play in the second preseason game, which is usually a sign a player has already made the team. And on Monday, head coach Brian Schottenheimer basically confirmed it, calling Bell one of the most trusted leaders on special teams and praising him as a good football player who does the little things right. And finally, offensive tackle Drew Shelton. Some fans have been calling for him to be cut after a rough preseason. But that is simply not how this franchise operates. Dallas has not cut a 4th-round pick or earlier this early in a very long time. Shelton is looking at what people call a redshirt year, staying on as a 9th offensive lineman without seeing the field, while the team develops him quietly. That is the full picture. Now let's go deeper into every single one of these stories, because there is a lot more to unpack. Let's start back at tight end, because this position group tells a bigger story about how thin this roster actually is right now. Think about it. A team that is supposed to be building a serious playoff roster just had to sign a guy off the street who spent the last 2 years running track before he even got back into football seriously. That is not a knock on Van Voren. His story is honestly kind of inspiring. A guy who set records in track and then decided football was still his real passion. But the fact that Dallas needed him this badly tells you just how banged up this tight end room has become. When you are down to needing emergency bodies before the final preseason game, it means somebody up top miscalculated the depth at this position, and now they are scrambling to fix it in real time. And Kelvin Gilliam getting waived hurts a little bit if you are a fan who loves an underdog story. Undrafted guys fighting for a shot is one of the most exciting parts of every training camp. But injuries do not care about grit or work ethic, and sometimes a roster spot just comes down to who is healthy enough to help the team survive the next 2 weeks. Now let's really sit with the cornerback situation, because this might be the single most important position battle on the entire roster heading into the season. Todd Archer is one of the most plugged-in reporters covering this team, and when he says the 4th cornerback might not even be here yet, that should make every fan a little nervous and a little excited at the same time. cornerback depth wins or loses games in this league. One injury to Darren Bland or Kobe Durant, and suddenly you are trusting a rookie or a practice squad call-up in a critical fourth quarter situation. If Dallas goes out and adds a proven veteran in the next couple weeks, that could be the quiet move that saves the whole defense later in the year. Now buckle up, because the Joey Porter Jr. rumor deserves its own deep breath. Just imagine this defense with a legitimate shutdown cornerback like Porter lined up across from opposing number one receivers every single week. Porter had 52 tackles, 14 passes defended, and an interception last season, and he held opposing quarterbacks to a rating of just over 57 when they threw his way. That is elite, shutdown level production. Pairing him with Darren Bland and Shavon Revel Jr. would instantly make this one of the scariest cornerback rooms in the entire NFL. But here is the reality check. Even though the rumor is exciting, a trade like this is not cheap. Porter's contract situation and the draft compensation it would take to pry him away from Pittsburgh make this a tough pull, especially with Markquese reporting the Steelers have not gotten a single call. Dallas is more likely to focus on a smaller move at cornerback for now, but do not be shocked if this name resurfaces again before the trade deadline. Now, the question of the day, and I really want to hear your honest opinion on this one. If the Cowboys had the exact draft capital required, should they go all in and trade for Joey Porter Jr. right now, even if it costs multiple high picks? Drop your answer in the comments below, yes or no, and tell us why. Let's go back to Michael Trigg, because this story hits different for a lot of fans who fell in love with his game early in camp. 4 catches for 30 yards does not sound like much on paper, but it was enough flashes to make people dream about what he could become in this offense. The problem is availability. You cannot make a roster on potential alone if you cannot stay on the field. If Dallas goes the injured reserve route, it actually protects Trigg in a way, keeping him in the building and eligible to return later in the season instead of losing him completely to another team's practice squad. It is not the flashy outcome fans want, but it might be the smartest one for both sides. Now to Markquese Bell, and this story is honestly a great reminder of why special teams matter so much in this league. Bell is not the flashiest name on this roster. He is not a former first-round pick, and he does not put up huge numbers on defense. But Brian Schottenheimer's comments were about as close to a guarantee as you will ever hear from a head coach during camp. When a coach specifically singles you out by name and calls you one of the most trusted leaders on special teams, that is not just praise, that is a signal to the front office about who stays and who goes. This also creates a real ripple effect at safety, where Dallas has to make tough calls between Bell, Julius Wood, and Elijah Clark for the final spots behind Jalen Thompson, Malik Hooker, P.J. Locke, and rookie Caleb Downs. Somebody talented is going to be left off this roster, and that is the brutal side of roster building that fans do not always want to think about. And finally, let's really dig into Drew Shelton, because the outside noise around him has gotten louder than it probably should. Yes, his preseason snaps have been rough to watch. Nobody is pretending otherwise. But history matters here. Dallas has an extremely consistent pattern of protecting fourth-round picks and earlier through their rookie seasons, even when the tape looks ugly. Go back and look at players like Skylar Green, a fourth-round pick from 2 decades ago who did get cut early, and it is genuinely hard to find another example since then of the Cowboys giving up on a pick that early in their career. That tells you everything about how this front office thinks. Shelton is almost certainly staying on as the 9th offensive lineman, inactive on game days, quietly developing behind the scenes so he can be ready when his number is finally called next season or the year after. So there you have it. 6 major storylines all colliding at once as this roster gets its final shape before the season kicks off. A trade rumor that could change the defense forever. A tight end fighting to stay relevant. A safety who just locked up his job with one simple comment from his coach. And an offensive tackle who is safer than the internet wants you to believe. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss a single update as these roster decisions become official over the next few days, because this story is far from over. Now let's take a step back and really think about what all of this means for the bigger picture, because when you put these 6 stories together, you start to see exactly what kind of team the Dallas Cowboys are trying to build heading into the season. Start with the tight end situation again for a second, because there is a financial layer here that a lot of fans overlook. Every roster spot in the NFL is a math problem before it is anything else. When a team signs an emergency body like Van Voren this late in camp, it is almost always a cheap, low-risk move, usually just a futures deal or a minimum salary tryout. It costs the team almost nothing financially, but it buys insurance in case Michael Trigg or DJ Rogers cannot go in that final preseason game. That is exactly why you see teams do this every single August. It looks small on the surface, but it protects the roster from a disaster if 2 or 3 players go down at once in the same room. Teams have literally lost entire seasons because they did not carry enough healthy bodies at one position during final cuts. So do not underestimate how important these unglamorous depth moves really are. Now back to cornerback, because this position deserves even more attention than most fans are giving it right now. Think about how much money has been thrown around the cornerback market across the entire league this offseason. Elite corners are getting paid like true number 1 receivers now, and that changes how front offices think about trades. When Todd Archer says the 4th cornerback spot might come from outside the current roster, that is not just a passing thought, that is usually based on real conversations happening inside league circles. Teams do not wait until the season starts to fix a weakness like this. They usually try to get ahead of it during final cuts, when other teams are letting good players go and cheaper trades suddenly become available. So do not be surprised if a name you have never even considered shows up on this roster in the next week or 2. And let's go even deeper on Joey Porter Jr., because this rumor is not going away anytime soon. Consider the family history here for a second. His father was a legendary linebacker who helped Pittsburgh win a Super Bowl, and that kind of connection to a franchise usually makes a trade even harder to pull off emotionally, even when the business side makes sense. Steelers fans do not want to see a Porter traded away, especially not one who is still ascending as a player. But money always wins in the end in this league. If Pittsburgh truly believes they cannot afford to pay Porter what he wants, history tells us they will eventually explore trading him rather than losing him for nothing in free agency. The real question for Dallas fans is timing. Does this front office wait until closer to the trade deadline when the price potentially drops? Or do they strike early before another desperate team swoops in with a monster offer? Both approaches carry real risk, and that tension is exactly why this rumor has fans so fired up right now. Now let's circle back to Michael Trigg one more time, because his situation is honestly a perfect example of how unforgiving this business can be. This is a guy who spent the entire offseason building real chemistry with the quarterbacks, showing exactly the kind of upside teams dream about in a tight end. Then one small toe injury at the worst possible time completely changes the entire conversation around his future. That is the brutal truth about training camp. You are never just competing against the other players in the room, you are also racing against the calendar, because roster cuts do not wait around for anybody to get healthy. If Trigg does end up on injured reserve, remember that this is not the end of his story with this franchise. It simply means his season gets paused instead of erased completely, and plenty of players have come back from an IR stash to have a real impact later in the year. Now think about Markquese for a second longer, because his journey deserves real respect. This is a player who went completely undrafted, fought his way onto the roster through pure effort, and has now survived 4 different defensive coordinators in 4 seasons with this franchise. That kind of survival is not luck. That is a player who has made himself impossible to cut no matter who is running the defense. When a head coach specifically singles him out for special teams leadership, that tells you Bell has become exactly the type of glue player that winning rosters are built around, even if he never becomes a full-time starter. And one final thought on Drew Shelton before we wrap this up. Patience is one of the hardest things to ask fans to have, especially when a rookie is struggling on tape during preseason football. But building an offensive lineman properly usually takes real time behind the scenes, away from live game representatives where mistakes get punished immediately. If this coaching staff truly believes in his long-term upside, a quiet redshirt year right now could set him up to become a real long-term answer on that offensive line down the road, and that patience could look very smart a year or 2 from now. That is everything on the table right now for this Cowboys roster as final cuts approach. A lot of these decisions are going to become official very soon, and when they do, we will be right back here breaking down exactly what it means for this team moving forward. Make sure you are subscribed so you catch every single update the moment it happens.